So Ben, before we started this episode, we asked, do we give you an intro or do we go straight into it? And you said, let's go straight into it. So my opening question for you is, how does someone, whether it's a client of yours or a coach listening to this, which is a lot of this audience, spot a weight loss charlatan?
Tricky one, because like we were talking about off air, there is so much information now that it's quite hard to decipher what is useful and what is not. The most basic thing is that we all should know by now calorie deficit works, but we're not going to harp on about that because that's obvious. But the thing is, you get a lot of compelling information telling you one thing, then another thing, then this influencer says this person that you follow says that it can be confusing. Like, I have clients come to me and they'll watch podcasts or listen to podcasts even, like Stephen Bartlett, and they'll ask, Zoe, how much of this stuff do I need to listen to? Is there something in these continuous glucose monitors that I need to be doing? Am I missing out? Is that the magic bullet? Should I think about doing fasting, intermittent fasting? Will it raise my testosterone by 3,000%? Should I be vegan? Should I drop meat? There's a lot of good things with some of this stuff that comes out, but there's nuance as well. And when you listen to this information, it's often in short form first, and you get this snippet and you hear something and it sticks with you, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to roll with that because that's the way forward, and you don't understand fully what's going on. So how do I spot a charlatan? If it's just pure BS, I don't know if you can swear on this podcast or not. If it's pure BS, you kind of know it straight away. It just doesn't work. Like simple stuff like detox teas, cleanses and whatnot, I think they've been debunked by most people. But there's other things that can be confusing because you'll have these pretty reliable sources saying valuable information, but then with a twist on the truth. So I think it's quite hard, much harder than it would have been in previous years because you've got so much information coming at you. So you almost have to try and find one or two select people that you generally get a kind of rounded answer from, and then I think that's the way it works best.
I think the way, even the word charlatan, I cringed when I said it because it's good for the algorithm, it's good for the thumbnail, right? But it's one of those things. Like, I made a prediction with one of my regular co-hosts at the start of the year, saying the prediction I have for 2024 is the term fitness misinformation, off the back of COVID misinformation, is going to become the hot button of people claiming good, solid health advice is now misinformation. Maybe because it's not the biggest priority thing, and like, I'm like you, when I get questions like that now from coaches, but when you're working with clients, it's that conversation. I must give them a frustrating answer. Is Zoe good? Is it worth it? I'm like, well, is there a benefit in continuous blood glucose monitors? Sure. It gives you some data that's really useful and can help you with a lot of stuff. Do you need to do it? No. And people are wanting that easy answer. As you said, the magic bullet to this is going to be the thing that saves me doing the hard work and the basic stuff. It's added stuff. The more data you give me, the better results we can get. But it doesn't mean you can't get amazing results without Zoe or something like that.
Yeah, and it's also like, how do you interpret that data? Like you just said, you can collect all of this stuff. You can now track like your calories, your sleep, your continuous glucose monitor. And then at some point you go, right, well, how much of this stuff do I really need? Like, there's probably a few big rocks that you can just tick off and you'll get exactly what you wanted. But because you're so overloaded with information, you're like, so here's the thing, I need this. I need to know that my blood sugar is stable so that I can lose fat faster. And you're like, really? That's your answer. And as you say, you obviously work with coaches and they can fall into this trap themselves because they'll think, oh, I want to get a better or quicker result, so I will use this method. And then for me, I'm working with one-to-one like clients who are mostly interested in fat loss, and they're going to go, well, am I missing something here? Yeah, okay, calorie deficit. What about this? Is this something we haven't addressed? You're like, not really. And you have to kind of brief them on how it really works.
And I think this is where I think podcasting is a really good, like a message for good in the fitness industry for the most part. And we're going to come on to where podcasts maybe fall short very shortly and talk about things like Stephen Bartlett and Dietary CEO. But again, most of the controversy I see even with Dietary CEO episodes is how they make the trailers. Now, rightly or wrongly, if you're making your own opinion or reacting to something based off a 60 to 90 second trailer, that's your biggest problem there. Like, great example of this is Paul Saladino, the carnivore guy, right? Everyone shits on Paul Saladino because he's he plays the Instagram game. Again, whether you agree or not agree with how people play the game for clicks, it's like broccoli is bullshit. But then if you listen to Paul for 90 minutes, he's incredibly nuanced. It's like, look, I had these autoimmune conditions. I removed vegetables from my diet. Something wasn't reacting well. I've got better blood work. I've improved my health markers. I'll show you them on a regular basis. And now I've realized I was wrong about some carbohydrates and I've added in some fruits. He's incredibly nuanced, but people's opinions come from that 45-second YouTube short as opposed to listening to somebody. And that's why I think a lot of the problems lie with this is that people don't take the time anymore to actually go, well, what is this person's opinion? Not just the thing that gets me in the door.
Yeah, and the problem is you get that buzz line of what you just said, like Paul Saladino. He's bound to have some good information. Like he's clearly very invested in what he believes in. And if you're somebody who just takes a little snippet of that, and you're like, right, that's it. I'm going to overhaul my diet. I'm going high fat. I'm going to have more protein. And you don't get your blood work done. That could be the worst thing for you because the time that you do get it done, all of a sudden your cholesterol panel and your lipids are all fucked up because you've just been consuming saturated fat like a mad person. You know, you have no nuance, no context, no understanding like somebody who's really gone and done the work to get that. And that's the danger of it. Like I said right at the beginning of this recording, like you've got all this information and you're like, right, how do I decipher this? What do I go with? What's actually reliable? What's healthy for me to get the most out of this? Whether you're now teaching it as a coach or, you know, you're a client trying to use some of this information from wherever you're getting it from.
Just out of interest, for people listening to audio might not have seen this, you put air quotes around the term healthy there. What made you put air quotes?
Because the word healthy has just been like changed so much in recent times. You know, like healthy to one person is not healthy to another person, right? So, you know, somebody could be doing a carnivore diet now and they're like, that's healthy. You eating broccoli is unhealthy. For another person, having a sugary drink is unhealthy without any context of anything else in their life, right? So, you know, I just put the air quotes up and you can't see it if you're listening to this, but because the interpretation there is just so vast amongst people.
I agree with you in the term healthy change as well. And I think it's all relevant to the individual. I think sometimes it's the thing I've started to realize recently with coaches and the way they put out content is that, like, how much of a concern do you think restrictive dieting methods have for potential clients? Or do you feel coaches these days project their own unhealthy relationships with food on their audience? So, like, because I see a lot of people, so much people talking about this. If I go on Instagram, this is the general thing I see with coaches. Like, don't restrict any food sources. MyFitnessPal will give you a bad relationship with food. You know, we've got to make sure we're inclusive of every single food. You never see this with training, do you? You never say, like, here's your total tonnage numbers. Go and fill it with any exercise you want if it fits your tonnage. But you see this with this kind of thing. Whereas I looked at the clients that we dealt with back in London, and it was like people needed simplicity. People probably ate 80% ultra-processed food, and this number's increasing. People probably need more restriction and more rules and more guidance. I feel that we've never had a bigger disconnect between what coaches think their clients want and what they actually need than ever before. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with you, but I think that comes from marketing. When you're trying to generate business and get people on board to say, you know, you can still include your social life on the weekend, you can have beers, and don't worry, we won't change your diet that much. It's an easier sell for a lot of people. You're like, okay, cool. I don't have to change my life, and I can actually get pretty shredded. I mean, I'd sign up for that. But like you say, the truth of the matter is, if your diet is 80% ultra processed shit, and you know you haven't seen a vegetable for the last month, then we need to do some work. And as you rightly said, when we were gym floor trainers, a lot of our clientele were coming with that background. And I think those early sort of working days together with a client are important, that you set down a structure and go like, look, this is not normal what you're doing. The way you're eating, this lifestyle is not conducive to being healthy, and you're not going to get the desired result. Like you need to give a little before you can get something back. So you put in the hard work, you shift the kilos, you learn how you really should have structured your day. And then once you've done that and you understand the system, you can start to play with it. You can't teach somebody how to be flexible with their food when they've been flexible the whole time. right? They need to be at a point where they're seeing a change. And then at that point, when you understand how you should be eating the majority of the time, you say, okay, well, look, if you want to add in whatever you enjoy eating, right, on the weekend, and you want to increase your calories a little bit, by all means, go for it. But not without that hard work done beforehand. Like, you can't have your cake and eat it, so to speak. Like, you have to put in the
Literally.
yards. Yeah. And, I think this whole nature with like MyFitnessPal ruining your relationship with food is a bit of BS, to be honest. Like, yes, you're going to have the odd person where they have a bad connection with food, and you need to vet that before you sort of get into using it. But most people don't. Most people project issues they have with food onto clients, like you said yourself. So if you use it as a tool like it's meant to be, and you say, look, this is what you're eating right now. This is what the app is showing you. Can you see that this doesn't fill you up? It isn't nutritious. You're not hitting your macro targets. Like, how does this work? You start to get a greater awareness of it, and you go, actually, yeah, you're kind of right. Let's think about this a bit more logically, have a plan in place, and use it for the greater good. And it's not to say now that, oh, you're going to live on an app and track every morsel of food that you put in your mouth. No, absolutely not. But you are building a skill. You do sort of build your own database of the things that you like to eat most of the time that fit your lifestyle, that have solutions for the way you like to do things. And then when you do pull away from it, you shouldn't be reverting back to the stuff you were doing before, because you've got the knowledge base. It's now just a case of, do you want to apply that stuff? And when you do, you're in great shape, or you stay in great shape. And if you don't, then that's a conscious decision, and nobody can say anything to you because it's your decision, right? And I think that's where it all comes from. And a lot of newer coaches are scared to kind of pull that trigger of a client and be like, no, look, what you're doing right now is terrible. It's just not going to work. Like, we need to start from here and then phase you up.
Yeah, I think like one of the things when I was working with clients and I was going through the reverse dieting process, I had this little document of things we want to achieve in this next 6 months to give you this sort of like balance between these things. And it wasn't move away from tracking necessarily. It's to be able to move away from tracking or double down on tracking without guilt either way. It is the same thing as like saying, like, if we went out for a beer, I wouldn't say beer is destroying your relationship with yourself. But if you were an alcoholic and I gave you that beer, it's an entirely different kettle of fish. And I think a lot of like clients aren't putting themselves in the shoes of their potential client and going, well, I've dieted for 6 bikini shows in 4 months, and now I can't have a white fish. I'm cutting bits of white fish off at a restaurant to make sure it fits my macros, and I'm bringing scales. The conversation of MyFitnessPal with that person is very different from a person who doesn't know how many calories are in a bag of crisps or 100 grams of chicken, or doesn't know what a portion size looks like. And I think, do you think, because on our macros conversation, right, one of the biggest things I'm sure you've seen with clients tracking the macros, and the thing I see with coaches wanting to give this inclusivity right from the off, is that people are really bad at tracking macros. It's a skill, and 1,200 calories and I'm not losing weight is almost become a meme at this point. Like, do you think that, like, when you're working with if you're working with complete beginners, the busy professional wants to lose 5 pounds without giving up any of the foods they love, do you reckon like people are overplaying the macros card too soon when they haven't learned the skill of actually having a bit of structure in their life? Like, do you think it's more complicated than it needs to be?
Yeah, I'll tell you, from the way I coach it, and I have done for a long time, I generally like to start people off early days with a meal planner. And I know that's going to sound almost prehistoric, but I'll talk to the client and just say, look, what do you like to eat, right? It needs to be in line with this. You're eating this many calories. I know you've never tracked ever. So you're not even savvy with how to use a calorie tracking app. So let's start with this, because it's going to give you an immediate structure. You're going to see weight loss. You're going to be excited about that. And I understand in a couple of weeks, you're going to be pretty bored of eating the same stuff. So we'll give you some variety. And alongside this, we will use a calorie tracking app so I can upskill you on how to use that thing. So when we get to the point where I say, okay, no more meal planners, you have autonomy to do what you want to do with this, we're in a good place. You're not getting these ridiculous claims where you're like, oh, I've eaten 1,200 calories and I'm a 90-kilo male and I can't lose weight. No, that's because you were not taught how to track properly. Once that's sorted, you're in a good spot. You start to make better decisions, because you'll go, oh, right, Ben said I should have 3 protein servings per day, and therefore I'm actually doing that, and I'm having some vegetables. And now I've got all these spare calories, and it doesn't really matter that much. I've got a bit of a higher fat intake or a bit of a higher carb intake. It's just dependent on whatever is important to me or however I'm eating on that given day or week. That's really as complicated as it needs to be. But, other coaches will just want to be so inclusive, and clients as well. They'll be like, oh, I want to include a beer or whatever it is. And you're like, well, you can, but it can't all come at once, right? Because as we said, if you do that right from the get-go, what are you learning? You're just trying to squeeze stuff in because you miss it straight away. And then also just like be pragmatic about it. If you take me right now, I'm dieting, yeah? Most 5 days a week, I'm consuming 2,000 calories. Like if I try to give myself a 20% allowance for something that I would want to consume, let's say it was 2 beers, like how useful is that in my whole diet? It means I've got 1,600 calories of meat and whatever else makes up my protein, some veg, some trace fats, and 2 beers. I'm not going to be satiated. It's not a clever move. Yes, I can do it as and when I want to, but what have I learned then? Is that really a sensible move? No, probably not. Get the person the result first, get that fat loss, get them the confidence that what they're doing is working. Then when you're away from that and you are reaching towards maintenance, as you were saying, reversing people up and they want to include a social, they want to include a beer, whatever, do it then. Do it when the work's done and the groundwork has been laid.
That's why I hate the term sustainability. When someone's, again, don't get me wrong, sustainability is the long-term goal. 100%. But when people say sustainability from the off, it's like, well, sustainability for you right now is 3 pizzas a week and beer with the boys. Right? So like a diet's not meant to be sustainable. Like a long-term deficit is not good for anyone's health. So let's get the work done and then build sustainability around your life. There was a great quote that I'll shout out to Shapeshifters Gym in Birmingham and Ant for this quote. But it was like, people think we lose motivation or we need discipline. And it's a great reframe when people lose focus, right? So if you can use motivation from the off to maybe get someone to have some sort of set structure and build what is their diet they can do without thinking about it, like we just fall back on good habits rather than bad habits. When we lose focus, we just continue to do the things that are now ingrained, as opposed to someone that's, here's your numbers, go. They've got every food in the world. Let's assume they don't make mistakes. Let's assume they're good at tracking. What's the routine they fall back on when life gets busy, when the kids get sick, when something happens and they can't stick to their routine? They've got no structure. So when the tracking is at the window, so does the fat loss.
Yeah. Do you know what? It's interesting you say that because the first time I was exposed to something like this, like creating these habits, was actually through Eric Helms. So he popularized the default diet. And this is a little bit different because obviously he's speaking about it for like bodybuilders and trying to get absolutely shredded. But the idea is clever. It's that you essentially make a floor of the lowest calories you would have when you are dieting really hard. So his would be like 1,500 calories, covering his protein needs and his vegetable intake and his micronutrients as much as it can, and then adding on top of that. And that would be called the default diet, like the basic structure of what you would eat most days. So as you said, if you then applied that to your normal person, you then just add stuff on top of it. So once you've had your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner, and maybe a snack, what else are you having on top of the day that you can just fall back on? If you've got a stressful day at work, kid's been sick, whatever it may be, that just makes it easier for you. And I think that's kind of what you get from doing those early things at the beginning, setting up somebody's meal plan. Like, let's be honest, you're going to gravitate to a few meals for meal options per meal. Breakfast, I can tell you personally, whether I'm cutting, maintaining, gaining, I'm having eggs most of the time, some variation, hard-boiled, omelette, more eggs, less eggs, whatever. Most days I'm having a porridge with whey protein and some berries. Most days I'm having an animal protein for dinner with some carbs, and I'm going to have either a Greek yogurt or a cottage cheese, like predictably most of the time. And the reason I can stay in a certain shape is because of that basic structure. So like even in previous weeks, we've had my daughter being unwell, my wife being away for a couple of days with the kids and whatnot. Just ever-changing stuff. And, without that kind of default, if all you know is macros, like that computation that you have to go through on a day when your stress is at the maximum, like good luck with that. that's going to be hard work. But if you know what the basic setup is, you go, okay, 1-2 tweaks, good to go. Right, let's get this day out of the way and things will get easier.
And I know the answer to this, but I want to hear where you take this question. It's like, do you think meal plans get unnecessary hate?
Yes, but I think they get unnecessary hate because they've been used in the wrong way for such a long time. If we go like way back when, like I can tell you even myself, back when online wasn't such a big deal, you send a meal plan, and because of the way that things are communicated, you wouldn't get people saying, "Oh, I need a bit of variety." They'll just think, "Well, this is how we get results. Follow the meal plan 1 and 2 for 12 weeks, get amazing results." They're like, "Fuck, I hate this diet. I've eaten prawns and stir fry for the last however many weeks." Right? And I think that's the expectation of a meal plan. People think, right, I'm going to be limited to 2 meals per day, and that's it. Or sorry, per meal, and that's it for the rest of the time. And there's resent because you're like, how do I do this? On the weekends? How do I do it when I've got a wedding to go to or whatever else? They just associate with like this is either on or off, and that's it. So I think it gets a bad rap. Maybe there's a bit of stigma around it. But I think if you set it up and you just think about it practically, like most people, Monday to Friday, they're working. They have a very set routine. Like when they're getting to work, when they're coming back from work, nursery, drop-offs, pickups, whatever else goes on in their week, probably eating very, very similar foods. So I'd argue a meal plan is actually very useful for coaches to kind of teach it in that way. And also for clients just to be like, look, how many options do you really need? Like how many different things do you eat right now for your lunch and dinner? I'm willing to bet it's not more than 3 different things. Yeah. Weekends, yeah, you need some flexibility. So are meal plans the devil? I would argue not. It's more the application of meal plans.
I think that's a really good answer. And I always say it's like people say that meal plans don't teach you anything, and I'm just like, I use that example of if it fits your tonnage earlier on, right? Well, then why'd you give a training plan? Right? What does that teach you? It teaches you structure, it teaches you routine, it teaches you which exercise to choose. Meal plan will teach you structure, it'll teach you routine, it'll teach you which foods are satiating, which foods are nutritious, which makes your foods feel good. And we just give nothing teach you less than here's some numbers, go, here's every food in the world. It's like what teach you Cantonese? Having a Rosetta Stone tape, and that shows my age, or whatever app you use now, Duolingo, to learn Cantonese, or just drop you in Beijing and say good luck. Like, you're not going to learn anything. It's just going to be so overwhelming. So going back to the misinformation stuff, and I said we'd come back onto podcasts. So what are the biggest sort of like influencers, podcast appearances that have particularly like ground your gears, and why?
Most recently, it's the Tim Spector one, and I don't really want to dig him out per se. It's more the concept. What I don't like is you're getting somebody who's very well educated, who's written books, right? Who I would imagine fundamentally realizes that the calorie deficit is the main thing, right, for weight loss, but is popularizing this idea and charging a fair whack, to be honest, for something that you don't necessarily need by creating a fear around it. So like I can tell you, even with the clients I work with, I've had a good dozen ask me about this, like, should we try it? Should we do it? And I've looked into what it is, like the testing and what the muffin, then taking a dump into the thing and sending it off. Like it's a lot. It's a lot of stuff to do with just like checking your blood glucose. And then when you really think about like what you would need to do, you could do all of this stuff without needing to do Zoe. Like it just seems like really well packaged marketing. And yeah, it grinds my gears just because it's just a very informed person twisting the truth, let's say, with some of the things that are being said. Like, I think I watched the whole episode, and one of the lines was, losing weight works when you calorie track, but it's hard to do, and most people reverse back and gain weight. I'm like, well, that's very vague, isn't it? I mean, what does that tell you? It tells you it basically works, but you have to work harder. It's like, well, no shit. Is there anything in life that you have to not work harder?
Putting a needle in your arm? Putting a needle in your arm and tracking blood glucose is easier, and people are going to keep to it better?
Yeah, well, I think the idea is you don't have to calorie track. And, I don't really see how that works either. Because even if you do eat very well and you have your blood glucose extremely stable, you can still overeat and be heavier. Like it's it's not a predictor of weight loss. And let's be honest, a lot of people want to do this stuff because they see it as a way of getting leaner and avoiding calorie tracking. So that's my beef with it for the most part. And then obviously you've got a big podcast like Steven's where he knows fine rightly that that sentence is going to just like capture so many people. Coaches like me, we're going to be pissed off about it because we know what we know. Clients who are into this sort of healthy lifestyle will be like, that's great. That's my thing. That's what I'm going to do next.
That's the thing I find the biggest thing with this, the Diver CEO episodes. Like, I once did a comparison, and I made it into a carousel on my page of like, guess the thumbnail title, guess the episode title, Chris Williamson versus Stephen Bartlett. And like the Chris Williamson episodes were like things like the secret to weight loss, or move better forever, or things like this, like, which are still like, I want to click on them, but they're not like, it's not sugar is killing you or calories are a total lie. And it's the, not only is it the clickbait nature to get people in, it's the hypocrisy of it. That if you remember when he did that diary, we know that interactive journal where you scan a QR code and you get lessons from people on different things. He had a fitness advisor, which was Darren Cartel. No disrespect to Darren, but Darren's a calorie counting, neat up 24/7 guy. So when it actually came to a product he was selling that his audience had to use, he all of a sudden contradicted all the guests he was getting on, which means he knows it and he's doing it anyway. So you can't say he actually cares for the listener anymore. He's looking at this like a business and what gets clicks. In that Tim Spector episode, he was binning all the stuff for sweeteners, and it was like, quick one, Huel.
Yeah.
Like, and I quite like Huel, but like, there's a hypocrisy here.
But the thing is as well, like Simon, you're not every single person is going to listen to every single episode or connect the dots or know the stuff that we know or go onto PubMed and research calorie restriction on adults and see what it does. You will just take what he says verbatim because he is a doctor, he's published books. Like, why would you question it? He's an authority. And that's the danger with it, because it's not going to be challenged. And you might see it as, oh, all these young trainers don't know what they're talking about. This guy's an authority. He's been doing it for X amount of years. And it's very easy and compelling to believe.
I also think as well, I would give him a little bit of slack if he got people on, like, let's say Lane Norton or Dr. Mike Ristotel, or people that like talked about the other side of the equation. Because I also think because we all, as we said at the start, we're not going to bang on about whether calorie deficits matter, because we all know they're true. Now, well, that being the case, if you only got people who talk about calories being the primarily and only factor in terms of weight loss, I would also criticize that show as being in your eco bubble on the other side of the equation. So I want to chat, like on this show, I'll chat to people who are interested in calories and hormones and functional medicine and like blood glucose and all these things. But it's creating that balance around the conversation, which I think he knows if you got someone like Mike Istel Lane on the show, you wouldn't get as many shares because you wouldn't rile up the fitness industry as much. So now for your people that want to lose weight, as you said, who don't watch every episode, you create this one-sided narrative away from the thing that's potentially going to have the biggest dramatic effect on their health. Because will hormones impact our weight loss? Will processed food affect how we feel, how we perform, how efficient our metabolisms are, inflammatory status? Sure. Is there benefits? And there's a great episode, if you haven't watched this, Rhonda Patrick on Modern Wisdom. Unbelievable. First line, is low omega-3s as bad as smoking? And there's very compelling research to say yes, there is. So, like, yes, that's all important. But we live in a world where we've become more sedentary than ever, that takeaways are in our phone, that if we go into a food shop, we're bombarded with high-calorie dense options. Like, yes, these things are important. But what is going to be the quickest, most effective thing that people can do in the life that we found ourselves in? We're not going to go back to Paul Saladino tribal eating. What is the thing that we can go, right, if I can become aware what's in these foods, I can make informed decisions. And pushing too far away from that is actually less accessible for people.
Yeah. It's a bit like if you take any diet, it doesn't have to be like the Zoe diet. Even if you take things that have been popular recently, ketogenic diets, or like all the craze, maybe 2 years ago, and everyone's like, I'm going to go keto and dump a load of water weight. And they're like, this is great. And then you go, right, how am I actually going to sustain this? Like, what normal person just eats high fat? Not many, not many. Swing it the other way. Like, you want to go low carb. Like, it works as well. But how often are you going to do that? What happens when, you've got a kid's birthday to go to and it's just sugar everywhere? You've got like birthday cake and sweets and whatnot. What, you're going to avoid everything? I highly doubt it. It's just trying to find sort of that middle ground. And as you say, you need to be well enough informed to actually do something with it. And yeah, look, it calls for a bit of work on your end. If you just watch these shows and you go, right, that's it, that's the answer, then you're always going to be stuck in the middle, whether you're a client or a coach, right? You're not really getting anything out of it.
Do you think there's a time and a place for diets like that, though? Because I had this conversation with a coach recently who had a client who was, he never stuck to diet. He was a chef, right? So he always overate on the weekends. And we spoke about the conversation of like, he wants to do it one more time. He's going to commit, but he perceives the same issues. And I'm like, okay, well, you could always just go like low carb throughout the week. And then just like, that adds a little bit of allowance, and it's easy for him if he doesn't want to track calories. Because I said this phrase to him, I don't know where it came from. I went, why does Slimming World make more money than you? Now, I'm not endorsing Slimming World or Weight Watchers or low carb as this ultimate diet approach, but I think where coaches often make the mistakes because they're willing to track the macros and train really hard and learn to understand foods. Clients are their priority, like we love learning about that. Their priority is law or accountancy or whatever their job is, or their family. They don't care about this. Like, Slimming World makes more money and gets more people in shape than pretty much every coach I've ever met because it's simple. And I think, do you think sometimes we lose the practicality in working out what is the most inclusive, the most optimal way of doing things?
I think the Slimming World example is interesting, but as I understand it, you have a point scoring system. You have SINs, don't you? Is that right?
It's calorie tracking with another name.
Yeah, so then the question is like, how different is it really to calorie tracking versus now? I'm not saying it's not a good idea, and I do agree. I think if you've got simplicity at the front of your mind, you've got less resistance because the person's gonna be like, yeah, well, I'm just doing 2 or 3 things and that's that. It's easy enough per day. And yeah, look, you're gonna have clients that will need a different approach. Not everybody's going to commit to tracking every day. I do think there's a massive benefit in doing so, but some people
how long
will
did we
resist
do
it.
low carbs? Like, sorry to cut you off there, but like how long do we do low carbs with diets? And probably got, again, there are flaws to a low carb approach, and it's not for everybody. But I would argue we probably got the most consistent results of our career on what is a more restrictive and very probably subpar diet approach because it was relatively easy to do. Oh, okay, I could just swap chips for a side salad.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like, as long as it's implementable, it's easy enough. But I also think, whilst it might have gotten good results at that time, I don't think you could emulate that kind of result now because people are just too well informed and there's more that they'd want from it. Like, I don't think if I said to you, right, Simon, next 12 weeks you're doing 12 low carb, that you'd follow through. You'd just be like, nah, mate, there's
Might
better
get a
ways of
couple of
doing
weeks.
this.
I do a boot
Yeah,
camp.
you get 2 weeks, you do 2 weeks, and then you're like, come on, mate, let's twist this around a little bit because it's not working for me. Yeah. So it kind of changes with the times, which is fine as well. But yeah, the simple message is that what you tell a client or a coach should be very quick to implement and simple enough to implement. So if that's tracking, then cool, track. If it's low carb, then low carb, whatever.
Which, because we said earlier on that I think the pendulum swung too far the other way, where people are pushing the calorie message because it's the biggest priority. It's a little bit of they're hiding behind the fact they don't know anything more. And this is coaches here. Like, it's just calories because they don't want to admit they don't understand the things that are a little bit deeper that could affect their client's physiology. And I've seen results saying olive oil is ruining your diet or nuts are ruining your diet. And it's like, well, like, olive oil is one of the most nutrient-dense food sources on the face of the earth. I would take some calorie density there if you can factor it in and like improve health in all sorts of ways. So where do you feel this balance is between calories, hormones, nutrient density? Like, the whole point of this is having nuance. Where is the nuance, in your opinion?
I think for a lot of coaches, some of this chat, as you said rightly, is hard to have because they're just not clued up on it. And I think some of it is actually well outside their wheelhouse, like stuff with hormones. Just leave it. I've seen coaches try to take this on and like, take this supplement to increase this and drop this and that. I'm like, you have no idea. You can't interpret that. If the person hasn't got blood work, you probably can't assess a blood panel unless you've trained as a doctor. So just do what you think is okay. Let the client make an informed decision. Let them discuss it with their health practitioner and take the advice there. But on the stuff that you can do, that you can advise on, like let's say the nutrition to an extent, think about what you're saying. Like, yeah, okay, we agree, calorie deficit is important. But if I said to my client, all right, well, all I need you to do is eat your protein and then the rest of the food is whatever you want it to be. What about if they just ate at McDonald's in the morning, first thing? They'll get weight loss, but they're going to feel pretty shit. You know, they're not going to focus. Their blood sugar, funnily enough, will be a little bit unstable potentially. They'll go into their next meeting unable to focus. So is it unimportant? I would say not, because it's how it makes you feel. Like, what does it do to your skin? Is your skin still good? Are you breaking out in spots because you've now just got a super high sugar diet, because you've learned how to macro track? Like all of these different things that could come off the back of not making better choices, or maybe restricting your fat so far. Like, like you said with the olive oil. Okay, I'm going to drop the olive oil. I'm going to use a fry light spray and lean meats and Greek yogurt. And my fat intake is less than 20 grams. What happens then when you're not actually feeling that good, right? You're getting
not absorbing
symptoms.
ADE and K, testosterone will probably follow suit, especially if you're dieting and even a deficit.
Yeah, exactly.
Like these things have a knock-on effect.
Yeah, and you feel worse and worse, and you're like, oh, I don't know what's going on. And you say to your coach, oh, I'm feeling horrendous, my hair's falling out, whatever it is. And your coach is like, just stay in calorie deficit.
Yeah. It's I think with these things, like when I approach the topic of hormones when working with coaches, it's like, I think you need to understand roughly how the system works. You're not there to supplement, you're not there to medicate, you're not there to prescribe, you're not there to interpret blood work, right? That's when you start to refer out and work with doctors if you're dealing with people with Graves' disease or Hashimoto's. That is above your scope. But also your choice of how long or how severe you put people in a deficit or a surplus has a knock-on effects on these things. So understanding what are the symptoms, like you said, hair falling out, right? It's a clear symptom of low thyroid. Well, if I know that, at the very least I go, right, let's push calories up now, right? Let's solve this issue. Does that make it better? Yes. Phew. Glad I knew that bit of information about how thyroid works. Or no, cool. Here's a doctor. Go and get this checked out. Get some bloods done. Let's see if we're okay. And understanding things like testosterone on fat intake, fat soluble vitamins, like these things are important, but it's understanding, I think, where a lot of people coach this independently from calories. They'll go, here is how thyroid works, and they'll talk about all these funky pathways. And I go, well, okay, but the biggest thing that affects all our hormones is going to be where our caloric balance is. Before we think of a lack of iodine to help thyroid and conversion of T4 to T3, well, if your calories are lower, thyroid will go down. If your calories are higher, thyroid will go up. And blood sugar control is harder in a surplus and better in a deficit. I'm like, calories are still the important thing here. And it's like, if you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. So like, if someone is feeling tired, look at their sleep, look at the nutrient quality, look at their stress before you go, I think it's thyroid. I think that's the thing. Because I see coach all the time, my client's not losing weight, it's got to be cortisol. I'm like, no, they're sneaking cookies, mate, and they're not telling you.
Yeah, and the thing is as well, some of this stuff holds true. Like, look, if you've got somebody with a thyroid issue, they might well need to be in a slightly bigger deficit at times, depending on what their symptoms are, right? If you're going to get a result where it might be going too slowly for them to the point where they're not motivated to keep up. And it's true. Look, if you diet somebody pretty hard or pretty long, eventually, cortisol is going to be a bit higher and you're going to get a bit of fluid retention. And if you don't know that, you as a coach could be doubting your client. You're saying, you're not following the bloody macros, blah, blah, blah. And what you don't realize is they're actually just retaining a ton of fluid. Like, it could be you just refeed them for a weekend and then bam, that weight falls off. You're like, oh, magic. What did I do? It's like, just dumped a bunch of fluid.
And the buy-in you'll get from your client from that as well, right? When all of a sudden you go, I expect a 2 kilo weight drop after this refeed, and boom, it happens. Like, oh my God, like Ben's a wizard.
Exactly. And so you need to have an understanding, but kind of like what you said, it is not your place to play doctor, because you're coached to do something completely different. But as you say as well, like, the danger is, as a coach, if you don't understand some of this stuff on a fundamental level, your client is not armed to deal with it either. And you pretty quickly get caught in a plateau.
Yeah. And how many times have you seen someone that's come from another coach has been low carb, low calorie dieting for 18 months and they've dug themselves into a hole? And now I'm not going to go into this starvation mode. And I know from one of your recent posts, like, this is something you used to believe, as did I. But I think people then go so far the other way going, it's bullshit. It's like, well, if you spend so long a time into a deficit, you will become metabolically less flexible. You will probably find you'll have more food intolerances. You will have a thyroid that's not functioning well. Yes, does that mean when you start to increase food, that doesn't course correct? But it kind of lags behind. And if you've lost a little bit of muscle in that process, you know, you might not find it's getting back to where it used to be. So, like, I think, like, I'm very passionate. Of course, I'm biased with what I do for a living, but I'm very passionate with coaches upskilling and understanding this stuff because, like, particularly blokes, right? They go to the doctor when the lump's already grown and their arm's already fallen off, right? But they and the reason why, and I give a break to doctors, that people go slam doctors because they overprescribe medication, and they do, but they know that you're not going to follow lifestyle advice. They know the lump's already grown and the arm's fallen off. They're just trying to put out the fire. They're underpaid. They're overworked. And I feel we give doctors a bit of a hard time when coaches who speak to clients every day can't get people to adhere to lifestyle things. So if statins are going to be the thing that stops you having a heart attack in 3 years, is it the best way to do it? No. Is it might be the only way to do it? Yes. So I went on a tangent. I lost where I was going with that there. But I do think it's like, yeah, that was it. We have the ability to impact people's health more like any other profession because we're speaking to these people every single day. We have buy-in, and yet people are losing this game with this because they go just about calories. I'm like, you've got someone's health in your hands and you don't think it's important to understand how this works? Like, I have coaches where if I say the word lipolysis, and they like they're gone, and I'm like, you call yourself a fat loss expert, and you don't understand what the word for fat loss is. And do you need to know lipolysis? No, but should you? I don't need an open heart surgeon that needs to know everything about my body, but I'd fucking like them to.
Completely. And like kind of what you said there as well, like we are, I don't want to say like preventative care because that's really arrogant, but as you say, we've got like quite a big influence on people's health. Like if somebody needs statins, whether or not they follow lifestyle advice or not, fair enough. I'm all for it, whatever is going to keep somebody healthier. But if you're just prescribing one thing and maybe you're overlooking something as simple as, I don't know, let's just say fat intake because you just beat the drum of calorie deficit, you could be missing out on a huge thing that could positively impact somebody's life because you weren't well enough informed as a coach or a client to implement the advice. And it's quite scary because I don't think it's a lot of learning. Like it's quite foundational stuff that you should know beyond just number crunching.
It's the scary thing when I see coaches these days. I'm not calling anyone out. Like there's a point. Like I have a real problem, especially in the exercise mechanics world, right? With a lot of the educators are very condescending. Like if you don't know the moment arm of a lateral raise, you shouldn't be working with people. I'm like, there's a time where you didn't know this too. Stop being a condescending prick. But there is also an element of like that level of knowledge. I think the pyramid in the fitness industry is getting higher. I think the people that know stuff know more than ever before. Like the access to good information is there, but the base of that pyramid, maybe because there's a lot more trainers coming in, but the lack of knowledge is staggering. Like I see people that are like, you overwhelmed at the smallest stuff, and I'm just like, God, there needs to be a foundation, and it's not coming from the level 3s, but there needs to be a foundation, you know, before you feel like if you don't really understand how calories work, other than eat less, move more. Oh, it's a scary place to be. Like, what do you think is sort of like in regards to the health space in terms of the influencer podcast game? What is sort of like the topic you think is either underappreciated or like not talked about enough?
Tough one. I think weirdly, I think it's probably training. Actually, I know training isn't necessarily going to resolve, your fat loss or whatever because you can't just out exercise your diet. But the way that most influencers train, or at least how they market that they train, is very, very like unrealistic. Like you see, like the fit girls doing these stair climbing exercises, workouts that you know they never did to build their bodies. Even like some of these crazy guy videos where they're like, levitating on something and then doing a press with like a girl in their arm. Like, this is for entertainment, let's be honest. And there's a lot of bad information because you've got that where people are like, I need to do something crazy like that to get in shape. And then you've got these exercise mechanic based coaches where they're like, right, you need to put a cuff here and align this and do that. I think that's kind of a big missing element, along with everything that we've said. And if there was a gap that I'm looking at, I'm thinking this is really confusing to the layman, I would say it's that. Because if you go online and you look for information, I think you'll find that stuff quite easily. Whereas programs now, training programs, where would you start? Where would you start with a training program? Like, you've got one person telling you like this optimal angle for your bench press, and then you've got like 5-3-1, and then you've got like hypertrophy templates. It's a lot. I think
I agree with that. And then I think that there's so many avenues you can take training as a whole being in the lack of this thing. Like, I see it now. I get coaches that, and this is not a SMU plug, but it kind of is. But I've got coaches that have come into this and done like RTS and done all these big advanced sort of mechanics course. And they say the stuff that we going over in training has been more game changing. I'm like, now, could I go into that level of detail? Well, yes, I could, but not to the level Michael Golden can, because who the fuck can? The guy's unbelievable. But you often find the problem with these RTS courses, like people learn from Michael, who's, in my opinion, probably the best educator in the world. But then people learn it from the person that learned from him, and then the people learn from the person that learned from them, and the person learned from them. And it gets so filtered down that you've got more bands than a sex swing. And I just think that like more like people, I see coaches go, well, like I've actually learned what's important here, rather than getting out a luggage scale every time I want to go on a leg press. And again, the training thing is such a really good point, because like I think people don't talk about the importance of muscle mass in longevity. Longevity has become a thing post-pandemic, but very few people are talking about increasing muscle mass affects trips and falls, which are one of the biggest causes of death in the elderly. And I think training 100% is a very fair answer to that. Absolutely fair.
I mean, if you think about like longevity, the person I hear speaking about it most is Peter Atia. I don't know how you say his name.
Peter
yeah, him. So like,
got the book there. I haven't read it yet, but Outlived. It's on my to read list.
Well, there you go. But I mean, like most people, if you said to them longevity, it will be things like calorie restriction, fasting, losing weight, yoga, meditation. And then when you say to them, how about the idea of just having a bit more lean mass to prevent you from falling, to having the grip strength, to being able to do like day-to-day tasks, standing up, whatever, like simple things. And I'm not even talking about the elderly. I'm not talking about like 60, 70-year-old people. I mean people in their 40s and their 50s, because it's interesting. I'm 35 now, and there's people I can see just 5-10 years older than me where they're already in decline. They're showing those symptoms. You think, wow, you haven't had a background in lifting, maybe not even to the same extent that I have, but somebody who's had some like basic level of training, and you can see how this is going to go. It's not going well. Like, you add in, you're overweight, you don't know what you're doing, nutrition and so on. You're losing muscle mass every year. Your body's working against you because, it just is, because you're aging. And you think longevity, right? Of even if you couldn't tick all the boxes with your nutrition, you didn't have that down perfectly, if you were training, you'd still get like a huge upside. So I think it's a forgotten variable.
The danger's in the dose as well, right? You said, like people talk about calorie deficit. They talk about zone 2 cardio. And they talk a lot about, and again, these things are really, really important. And I get like people are pushing the AMPK sort of thing. So if anyone's listening to this again, going back into the podcast movement, you'll get a lot of people, can't remember the guy's name now. I probably should be shouting him out anyway, because a lot of his stuff is bollocks. But a lot of the pro-vegan movement for longevity is around about pushing this sort of AMPK pathway, that we're not building dangerous cells and things like this. But the danger's in the dose. If I spend too long in a caloric deficit, why does Brian Johnson have to take testosterone patches every day? Right? Because his diet is not giving him something. So like, as you said earlier on with hormones, this cycling of calories is your thing for longevity. You want to have enough time in a surplus to hold on to as much, if not build some lean mass for falls and strength and being able to move and do stuff as you get older, and enough time in a deficit to manage inflammatory status, manage various other things. And like it's so the biggest thing I would take if anyone's listening to this thing thinking, right, how do I spot let's go back to that title of the show, charlatan? It's like, well, if anyone has an absolute with anything, rather than this is part of the puzzle, and it doesn't mean the exact opposite isn't also part of the same puzzle. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, it's so tricky. It's so tricky because we almost come back to the start of the podcast. Really, you're now stuck between like all of this stuff that is relevant. All of it is, like you just said yourself, zone 2 is important, training is important, your diet is important, and you start to try and pick it apart, and almost like you said with fact checking, like who's gonna fact check every single fitness topic and tell you what is correct? I mean, even the fact checkers were how do we word this, a bit dodge at times. Certain things weren't actually facts, and we're always going to have this problem, I guess. But it's going to be tough to spot charlatans, I think, apart from the really obvious ones, because of the fact that we're always going to have more and more information. Would you agree?
So for people I agree. Would you, for listeners going into the training thing, like the biggest thing you find talked about in the training world now, if you want a more generic rule, is this topic versus volume versus intensity. With Mike Isdell saying everyone's going to do 10 to 25 sets per week, and try giving that to Jordan Peters, and we can do a lot from 2 sets. For most people listening to this, so your clients and the clients of most of the coaches watching this, what is more important if someone wants to train to have a little bit of muscle mass, hold into lean mass, intensity or volume?
You can't have one without the other. You can't have one without the other. And it's quite simple. Like, I would say you probably start with intensity, because if you go to the gym today and you do a 20 kilo dumbbell press and it's whatever, 3 sets of 10, let's say, and you increase that over time, as you would, because your body will adapt, you have increased volume straight off the bat, even without intentionally adding a set. So in doing that, you will increase it. And naturally, it's going to have an effect on your body. I think the thing with these concepts are that you need to strike up some guidelines for people to work with. You can't just say, go and do whatever you want, because you're going to get, 80 or 90% that will respond well to 10 to 20 sets. Then you're going to have the outliers like JP, where, he just moves such incredible tonnage that, good luck trying to do 20 sets of what he does. It will probably kill you.
It's close enough to failure because he's got that tap mentality. He's willing to do it.
Exactly. And then you've got, somebody who's never been to the gym. Could they do more than 5 sets a week? Probably, right? Until they get to the level of skill required. So then this discussion of like, what's more important, intensity and volume, depends on the person. And depends is a cop-out. It is a cop-out, but it's always going to be the case. So I think you start with intensity. You make sure that this person trains with really good form. They understand how far they need to push a set, and then dose it accordingly to that person and how they're progressing. So I know for myself, when I started, I did a lot of training volume in the beginning. And as I've gotten older, my recovery powers aren't what they used to be with all the responsibilities. And as I've just gotten a hell of a lot stronger, what used to be 4 sets for me is now 3, sometimes 2. And I still get a good effect from it. So then you start to look at like, what's going on in your life? Are you as free as you were in your 20s, where you didn't have a mortgage, kids, and all the other stuff you could reel off? No. So you're stressed out. Your recovery is a bit of an issue. Your volume and intensity have to reflect that. If you're all of those things I just said, like a lot of my clients are, then am I going to start you off with 20 sets? No, I'm going to find the minimum effective dose to keep things moving, get your buy-in to be in the gym, to do the work, to see the results, and then say, hey, you know what? We've been running 10 sets for most of your body parts for the last 3 months. I think if we tinker with it a little bit, and you could spend maybe another 10 or 15 minutes in the gym once or twice a week, it could push your results a bit more. Do you think you could do it? Quite often I'll get the reply, yeah. Sometimes it's a no, which is fine, but it's an easier sell overall. So I think that's the answer I can give you on that.
I 100% agree with everything you said there. I always think, I look at the volume versus intensity thing as I look at it imagine 2 triangles sitting on top of each other, so point to point. right? When you get a new client, they probably can't generate that much intensity. They probably can't work hard. They probably don't know where failure is. This is my problem with reps and reserve, right? Reps and reserve's great if you're you now in your 30s that can train pretty hard, or Jordan Peters who go to, you know what, if you go to like -4 reps in reserve, you're probably going to be fucked, and it's going to affect your total volume and tonnage over the course of the week. But most of your clients who think 1 rep in reserve is actually 46 reps in reserve because they have no idea. So I think you start with that bigger base, get them moving, get them practice, and you increase intensity to find out what is the minimum effective dose. Where is that bit where we now know where no reps in reserve is? So if we want to pull back to 1, it's a 1. And if we want to then go, okay, let's get 1 hard set, and you're progressing each week, and then you go, I'm not progressing anymore. Well, now let's go to triangle 2 and broaden out that volume again, and adding from a base of, right, can you recover? Cool, let's do more. Can you recover? And this is why I think sometimes people kind of get lost in sound bites and science in training, as well as we spoke about with nutrition at the start. How many people are now getting hard-ons for length and range work and length and range partials?
Oh my God, yeah.
And like, don't be wrong, is this some compelling research? Not as compelling as people like to say it is, but there is some logic in this. Maybe you want to bias more length and range stuff. But let's say I do 2 sets of hard RDLs and 2 sets of hard hack squats. Biasing more mid to length and ranges, probably my best bang for the buck. Cool, fantastic. And then I get to the need to do 3. And then I get to that point where, cool, I'm not progressing anymore. I need more volume to grow my quads, but my nervous system is already struggling to recover from 3 sets. So 4 is just going to tip me over the edge. Well, then, do you know what? You can do a leg extension, and it will still get growth, and it will get growth without fucking you.
It's not lengthened.
I know, it's mental, right? Like you mentioned, like, your recovery capabilities aren't as good as they were 10 years ago. Imagine if you're a lawyer. Imagine you were getting 3 hours sleep. Imagine when you just had your daughter. Like, do you know, maybe some short range stuff is probably good because it's easier to recover from, and you want 2 hours sleep, and because you've got vomit and poo all over you because you have new dad. Let's, like, people don't understand the bigger picture, so they can't add nuance and context.
Yeah, and the thing is as well, like, if you look at it, I think that volume is now sort of coming back down. The guidelines got really ridiculous. Like, people are saying, you need more than 20 sets on some body parts. Maybe your back, you know, with all the different angles it's got, you got to do this, and for your traps and for your lats and blah, blah, blah. And now you're starting to see people go, hey, you know what? I think if you just work a little bit harder and do some length and partials, you can probably get what you need out of that. So I've noticed a trend where people are recommending more towards that 10 set mark now than they used to, let's say. But yeah, certainly, like, a couple of factors for when, you know, in my own case, like when my daughter was born this year, like, I wasn't going to get into the gym 4 times a week. I definitely wasn't going to do my normal training volume. I scaled it back to 3 sessions, as much as I could do effectively and recover from. Still saw progress. So, you know, if somebody who's been lifting for plus 10 years can do that, then yeah, there's no reason why you'd go and throw the kitchen sink at somebody who's relatively new.
Exactly. And then, like, if as well, like, most of your clients don't love training like you as a coach will love training. So if you can do more work with less, why would you hammer more? Like I don't say, like, people, I the amount of times I see people whose niche is, I work with busy professionals who want to get in shape without giving up any of the foods they love. And they have 4 times a week in the gym. They have real complicated meal prep and food volume guidelines, right? They demonize liquid calories because, you know, that they're not whole foods. Like, you know, but they haven't got much time. And we just see this stuff where, like, and like, it just, what's on the outside doesn't match what's on the inside. And then they complain they don't have adherent clients when they've just asked for non-adherent clients in their marketing all the time, right?
Yeah.
So I think, like, when it comes to training guidelines, like, you can either do a lot of work or you can do harder work. You can't really do both. So if you've got a client who wants to train twice a week and just doesn't really like the gym, well, you better make sure those times in the gym are, like, making your eyes want to pop out your head hard. But if you don't want to train that hard, and you've got the time to do 6 days a week and you love it and you just love being in the gym, then maybe we pull back a bit to allow you to do 6 days in the gym, because doing something positive for your health every day is the thing that keeps you on your diet.
Yeah, then it really comes down to who you're working with as well. Like, I'd say the majority of my clients are 3-4 times a week, but you're going to have the outliers who are quite advanced and obsessed with this stuff, where they need 5-6 days to organize all this stuff that they need to get done to make measurable progress. And then, you know, it's just who you're talking to and what advice you're giving them and who your target niche is. and how you cater to them. Like, it's got to be congruent. Like, as I said, you can't have somebody who say, I help busy professionals, and then they've got 90-minute workouts 4 times a week. But right off the bat, it doesn't work. So you've got to be specific to how you cater to them.
So to finish off this episode, I've got a couple of closing questions. But before that, I think it's really easy when we have these conversations to make it seem like, oh, we're these big experts that never get fooled by the bullshit online. And we both know that's not true. I have fallen for some ridiculous things and probably still will at some point, right? When I start to, like, it's the Dunning-Kruger effect. You think, oh, it's just calories. I get this game. And then you dive a layer deeper and you go, oh my God, well, I understand anatomy. And then someone says fascia. You're like, what? And then you, like, every time at every level, I'll have something where I'm like, oh my God, that was the dumbest thing ever. So what's the biggest fitness influencer myth you used to believe, and why don't you anymore?
Rest in peace, Charles. But I think we all fell for quite a lot of the stuff that we learned from there. You know, that you had to avoid carbs until you were 10% body fat because your body wouldn't be able to use them. The insulin model where you've got to keep things stable for as long as possible, apart from after training, where you can have carb powders and as much sugar as you want and some berries.
That contradicts my own point as well. Like, remember I was saying earlier on about, like, sometimes understanding pathways allows you to interpret research. This is where it goes too far, because in theory, all of that makes sense. Post-training with GLUT4, there's an argument that insulin's going to get him better. Keeping blood sugar stable is going to help. But then when you go so far to the extremes where you forget the things that actually matter, you know, like logic goes out the window there a bit.
And also things like this is going to make you really go. Optimizing testosterone production with supplements for, at the time, a 25-year-old male. So, like, at the time of your life where your test is probably going to be at its highest, where you've got minimal commitments, I was taking a stack of supplements that weren't really all that good.
Were you doing the 5 amino acid capsules in between every single set? Like, you were going through like 40 amino acid branch chains of workout?
Yeah, the branch chains, 40. I was getting to the point where I was finishing a set, burping, and then it was coming out my nose as well. Because we didn't have any BCAA drinks at that time. And then there was like all this like weird supplement stuff like tribulus, horny goat weed, zinc, vitamin D. I mean, I drank like a whole bottle of zinc, thinking it was going to help. I mean, that's toxic. That's just stupid, right? So there was all these things. And then even around that time, there was this idea of like carb backloading, where if you just stayed insulin sensitive all day, at the end of the day, if you'd done that, you could just eat whatever you wanted carb-wise and you'd get leaner. And I was quite lucky. Skinny boy, lots of gym hours. It actually worked for me. But you give that to somebody who's overweight, who isn't active, who doesn't train hard, who doesn't move much, it doesn't work. So, you know, I've been as guilty of making mistakes as anyone else. I didn't understand energy balance right off the bat. I didn't even understand calorie deficit. I genuinely believed that you just had to be, you know, blood sugar stable and you would lose weight. So stuff like Zoe, to me, 15 years ago, would have been like gospel. I'd have been like, if I do this, I'm going to get lean.
And that's the thing, like you say earlier on, like, you know, I don't want to ever seem like I'm calling out the coaching industry of like, it's scared that you don't know stuff. Like, I don't mind if people don't know stuff. You've got to learn somewhere. But like the difference here is like you are committed to learning to be a good coach first, and then we'll worry about the business stuff later. And like, and you go through these phases. Like it's like the same thing. And again, it's that little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. Like carb backloading. Well, there's a logic to increasing some serotonin before bed, help you get more restful sleep. It probably helps you restrict your calories because there's only so much you can eat in one meal, and it makes it a very easy way to restrict calories throughout the early part of the day. Post-training, again, we spoke about GLUT4, but like the only thing that's great if you've got, again, you're moving well, you've got more carbohydrates than you can ever eat, you still wouldn't get to your maintenance calories. But how many people get so hungry that they start raiding the cupboards and justifying that that's now okay? And it's like, for every person carb backloading works for, there's another person that justified 20 boxes of cookies because backloading, bruv.
Yeah, carbs. I'm going to get leaner. Ben said I was going to get leaner. Carb backload. And you wake up tomorrow, like, I feel like shit. Why is this not working? I need to repeat this cycle. Yeah, no, it does happen. And look, I've been as guilty as anyone else without even understanding what I was recommending. So it's not a dig at anyone starting in the industry, but I would say the difference is for both you and I, when we started, there wasn't this much information readily available, like good information, right? Like, I think it's a bit different when you're a coach versus when you're the public. You know that there's a handful of very good people that you can go to for most things. Like, if you wanted some nutrition advice, you go and look at like the likes of Alan Aragon, Eric Helms, and so on, and you get that basic information. If you wanted training information, you could even use their pyramid books, which are great. And I'm not even trying to endorse them alone, but they're the first ones that come to mind. Supplements, you go on examine.com, do a little bit of reading, and you know straight away. Exercise mechanics, you've got people like Michael Golden, absolutely amazing. And then you've got RTS in general. Like, if you're going to fly out there, fantastic. You cover a lot of ground with those things, so you can upskill quicker. Whereas back when you and I were doing it, like, Poliquin was the main thing. I can't really recall any other courses that were even on the map.
Not really. And like I say, like Poliquin, for every bogus bit of information where he's trying to sell supplements, there's also things where he's well ahead of the game that are now science is catching up with him. Like omega-3 to omega-6, I mentioned that earlier on. Like we're supposed to have like 2 to 4 parts omega-6 to omega-3, but now in the Western world it's 25 to 1. Yeah. Like the again, where it's like, how much do you really need to know beyond calories? It's like, well, it doesn't mean you throw your whole mentality out like we just need to get as much omega-3 fats as possible and people get really, really fat, because that's also not good for inflammation. But like, again, throwing in a little bit of fish oil and some oily fish, and like I've seen it. The high dose Charles Poliquin, 9 caps of fish oil a day I go to a client. Is it excessive? Yes. Did he lose his beer gut within 10 days? Yes. Like there is like, there can be things that are both excessive and effective. Both things can be true at the same time. It's just, do you know this stuff enough to take a gamble on some of these?
Yeah, but Simon, you gave him 9 caps. The recommendation was 1 cap per percentage point of your body fat. So if you were a 40% fat male client, good luck. You'd be drinking that stuff.
True.
Yeah. So no, RIP. A lot of good concepts from Charles, but like, because you asked me the question, I think it's just so much more readily available. I would just would argue that if you're the modern day coach, you have so much more accessible to you to be upskilled. And what you see, I'm sure you see this, is coaches now looking at how they can get people through the door. They're doing courses with business mentors. They're learning marketing before they've learned some of this stuff. And then as they're signing up, they're like, what should I set my clients' calories to? You're like, how the fuck do you not know how to set up a diet before you actually got somebody through the door?
That generally scares me. It's like, you wouldn't go to you wouldn't go to an accountant who couldn't file a tax return. You wouldn't go to an open heart surgeon who didn't know how to do the surgery because they had a good hook or a good video editor or a good reel. And yet we see people throw more money, more business mentors, more editors onto the problem. And I would argue, I think most coaches have less of a lead gen problem and more of a retention problem. Like, they can't keep clients. I have seen, we spoke about training, and like we mentioned from the health perspective, people should talk more about training. But I've looked at checking some coaches where for 6-7 weeks, they haven't mentioned training. They're talking about journaling and life coaching and ice baths and morning routines and calories and like things like this. And they don't touch training. And they wonder why after the dieting phase ended, the client doesn't see value in their service anymore. It's like, well, you never set a strength goal. You never looked at the tonnage. You never asked for exercise videos. You've set the program that someone's probably just given you on a template, or it worked for you, and off you go. And the thing that I would say about this is that there's more information readily accessible. When me and you did this, there was less information, but coaches on the whole had a drive to find it. Now we have more information and people just don't care. Like,
Simon,
the amount of low-cost lectures and free stuff that people just won't do. You give them to them free and they go, sorry, I'd rather just play PlayStation or just do some more lead gen. I'm like, that's scary.
Simon, think about it. Like, when we were doing it, every course that you went to that was reputable at the time, you saw the same people. You'd bump into them and be like, oh, you're on this one as well. And you'd be like, it was the same sort of 20 people in most courses, right? That you would see. You'd see everyone at the Poliquin courses, like by hundreds. You'd see hundreds of people. And then after a couple of years, you started to see Luke Johnson bringing a couple of people over to the UK and to Bath and Birmingham and whatnot. And that's when you saw everyone sort of meeting up, and those were the evidence-based coaches. And now everybody just seems to be, just marketing, which is, like I said, it's just so scary.
I see fitness symposiums. Like we looked at ISI and Swiss and these events, right? And it's like Eric Serrano and Luke Lehman, and these are the people we're listening to. And now I see London Fitness Expo, Stephen Bartlett, Ali Abdaal, James Smith. And at least I could say that James Smith is a fitness guy, sort of. But the other two, I'm like, is this a fitness summit? Like, there's no fitness people here. And I've been to a few seminars since I come back, like 2 or 3 of them, and there was average about 10 to 15 people here. I remember 10 years ago, I went to an Eric Helms seminar, and they hired out the whole function room of the Tottenham Hotspur ground, and they filled it, like chairs upon chairs upon chairs. And I'm like, this is mad. Like people are struggling. Good coaches. I'm not just talking me. I'm talking good. No, not that I'm not good, but like people who have established getting 10, 11 people to a seminar. Like, people like I've seen James Sutton did the thing the other day. Amazing coach. Like 5, 6 people there. I'm like, what? Like, I would travel across the country when I was 25 to listen to someone like James Sutton speak. Like,
completely.
And yet people are now gone.
You were saying, you just listed off those 3, like James Smith, for example, like kind of fitness is what you said. But you look at his messaging, it's like, oh, don't get too shredded. It's not pointless. Your dick will go limp, and there's no point of having abs. No one cares. Love yourself. And then you're like, well, if you're learning from him, that's what you're learning. Like, you're not going to raise the standard for your client. You're just going to be like, don't worry about getting too lean. It's pointless. Yeah. And then you give them that message. They lose 2-3 kilos. Like, just love yourself. It's good. That's what you wanted anyway. You're like, what's your service? Like, this person's after life-changing. Life-changing isn't 2 or 3 kilos of weight loss, right? They're in poor health. It can't just be that message. It's important. Yes, the pendulum swings both ways. But if they've signed up with you, you need to give them something where they're learning, empowering, and actually getting a proper result. So you've got to be careful who you're learning from as well.
Yeah. And James Smith, recently I saw his sponsored thing pop up for his business course, and he said the phrase, most coaches leave the industry not because they're not getting good results, but because they're not skilled at sales and marketing. Now, to give James his credit, I think there was an element of truth in that. There are great coaches that don't know how to get clients that are struggling and burning out. And also, from a marketing, sales, email marketing perspective, James could be the best business course on the planet because he's one of the few people who is a proven commodity in making a true name for himself in the fitness industry. But I would argue that most people, the good thing about James, outgoing lad, good-looking lad, real gift of the gab, funny, entertaining. Now, a lot of those skills you can learn. But other people who just want to do a really good job with the clients of a big, long, sustainable business, no matter what they do, they're never going to be James Smith. So now you giving them the same thing, they might need more results. We're adding to this pile of coaches that just think, I had this the other day. Like someone said to me, I said, I've got a bunch of free resources for training and nutrition. And someone goes, it's all right, mate. I'm on James Smith's course and we're learning the same thing. I went, you're learning the same thing? Oh yeah, like sales and marketing. Like, yeah, I don't do that. And it's scary that that's the first place you're going. And it really is. I think it's going to be an interesting year in the fitness industry where I think there's going to be a shift when clients are starting getting wise to it. But I think we've got a little bit of time left before these people get caught out.
Yeah, I mean, the sooner it happens, the better, really, because it will be a good thing for the clients and it will be a great thing for the coaches because they'll have to upskill. And the level of upskill, to me, isn't that high. Like some of the stuff we're talking about, some of the resources you're probably telling people to go and check out are things that we did when we were in a certain London-based gym, where, we had to upskill quickly. We'd read in our free time and we'd go, oh, okay, actually, that makes a lot of sense. Let's implement that. And then bam, you see it working. But it does require a little bit of time. It can't just be, marketing. It's like, how do you deliver that service for that client so they get the result?
I think of a 10-year business more than a 10K month.
Yeah.
Like the old, I'm a big James Bond fan, and like Silver and Skyfall, which in my opinion is the best James Bond movie ever made, second to probably You Only Live Twice, said that last rat standing. If you're the last rat standing, that you're gonna have a better business. The problem is you can make a great 10K month and go bust, and I think that's where a lot of people are going to go. So I have a closing question I ask every person that comes on the show, but I do want to ask off the Poliquin thing one other small question. And I saw this in your content. You bring this up, so this is why I asked this. Are you still a fan of the meat and nuts breakfast?
Me personally, it's impractical for me. So, like my morning routine, the first thing I'm doing is getting the two girls ready for nursery. So I'm having a coffee while they're having their breakfast, or I'm feeding them. So me doing meat and nuts is not going to happen. Coming home, cooking up steak with my eggs or ground beef, I would eat it. I don't have a problem with it. But again, it's probably not the first thing I would eat, and I can't say that I've ever experienced that kind of sharpness through having a more protein and fat-based meal personally. I have had clients who I've recommended it to who've been skeptical. They've had it and actually been like, you know what, surprisingly, it's not bad. Ground beef doesn't take that long to make, and I use a bit of this and I feel quite sharp, but I would not really push that. Like, I wouldn't create a meal plan for somebody to say, hey, we're doing meat and nut breakfast because this is the thing. More often than not, 9 out of 10 times when you're looking at breakfast options, people are going to be gravitating to porridge, eggs, simple stuff that they can grab on the go. So yeah, I'm not opposed to it. I would eat it if I had a bit more time available in the morning, maybe, but it wouldn't be a regular feature versus how hard I was on it before. Like, this is the breakfast. Eat this for like the most stable blood sugar ever.
Yeah, this is where the optimal and practical thing comes in, right? Like I've always looked at the meat and nuts breakfast. I still look at the science behind it. I still look at how I feel with having a meat and nuts breakfast and how a lot of clients felt. Like, it was always a hard sell when we were told that's the way you had to do it. But whenever I convince someone to actually give it a go, I've never, ever got anyone regret it. They've always felt better. They've always felt sharper. They've always felt less energy spikes. If you can come back to the blood sugar argument. So I still very much a firm believer if people are willing to do it. And again, the key thing here is it's not the make or break. If you love porridge and it's your favorite part of the day, you go nuts and have your porridge. But I like a protein and fat breakfast and then modify it. So that could be eggs. It could be smoked salmon. It could be a shake. I have a shake with an essential oils product, right? Which is just like, it's just sticking some oil in a shake basically. But it's mixture of fish oil, olive oil. It's nerd shit. But like that, just blend it up, down the hatch, done. Like, that's why I wanted to ask that question, because it was something both of us went really hard on. I still see the benefits, but again, the practicality of it is the big thing. So, last question. I ask everyone this, and I think this is probably you might have already answered this, but and it's relevant for this conversation that we've had today. But name me one thing that you have changed your mind on. This could be professionally or personally.
Wow. Wow, that's a big one, because there's probably quite a lot of things. I think it's funny, as time passes, you almost forget how many things you change your mind on. Yeah. I think if I'm talking like professionally with clients, it's probably just being more around the client and doing what they can do versus what I think is optimal. And the other thing is a mindset that I used to have where I was like, you have to want it more than the client. So I used to think like, you give it to 100% and the client will get the result. As bad as it is, sometimes it's not that. You can give it 100%, but the client won't give it 100% for whatever reason. And you have to accept that as long as you do what you need to do to the highest possible level, and you really looked at everything, that it's okay. Not everyone you have is going to get the result that you see. And maybe that's fine. What they want to achieve is enough. Like, you pushing them for 6-pack photo shoot, whatever, might not be for absolutely everyone, which kind of goes against what I'm saying with the James Smith's comment. But I think they're two things, and I could probably reel off a couple more for sure. You definitely caught me off guard with that one.
I deliberately catch me off guard with that one, because I think you always get a really interesting answer. And I'm really glad you said that. I think expectation management is something that coaches should struggle with. And I did for most of my career, of just like having this or that question. You set a goal together and they might come in wanting to have the Men's Health cover model look. And down the line, they realize they might have to give up beer with the boys on a Saturday. And you go, right, well, if you notice here, you set this goal. This is the thing that's holding you back. Like, what can we do to dial this in? Or do we need to reframe the goal? And there's no issue with someone going, do you know what? I need to reframe the goal. Like if your priorities change, your life changes, that's cool. But we have this thing where coaches having this I'm either trying to push my goals on them, or I'm trying to live up to the goals they set at the start, not really realizing things have changed as they've realized the work that's putting in. But as long as you genuinely know that's the thing, I think that's really important, because I see so many coaches have that. You should want it more than your client. They burn themselves out trying to do everything and going above and beyond. And the client does need to want it more. And yes, you should keep them accountable. You should set goals. You should be on top of them. But at the end of the day, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And you just need to make sure you and your client are very clear of the amount of work you're doing gets this goal. And if you both know, oh, it's slow, but I'm all right with that, or I'm going to go harder than you ideally want, but it's okay, I'll manage the shortfalls of it. It doesn't really matter which extreme you land on, as long as you're both in alignment.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, you know it yourself, because you've been very lean. You've been very lean yourself before.
Mm-hmm.
You know how it is. You do get to a tipping point where you're like, the stuff that you need to do now to go to the next level, air quotations, is going to be a hell of a lot more sacrifice in your personal life and what you're doing day to day, and how much you're suffering through a diet and whatnot. So like, yeah, expectation management from the trainer and the client. So the trainer has to be, 100% if the client's 100%. If the client's 60%, you still have to be 100%. You still have to tick all your boxes. But sometimes being okay with the fact that you have to have that conversation and be like, look, you're saying one thing, you're doing another thing. Let's reframe it. What do you want here, so that I'm not pushing you to a level where you don't enjoy the coaching process anymore because I'm pushing you and you don't want to be pushed. Like, just come together and make it a harmonious coaching relationship and pursue another goal, if that is the thing. For me, that took ages, because I was very driven in like raising my own profile, if I'm being honest, to be like, I am a transformation coach. I can get you from A to B in record time. But after a while, you realize that not everybody that comes to you wants to go from A to B in record time, or they don't even want to go to A to B. They want to go somewhere in the middle, and you have to be okay with that. So yeah, I'd say that's probably one of the bigger things I've changed my mind on.
Or they want to go A to B, but they don't realize what it actually entails to go A to B. And then when you realize that, they go, actually, can I have, 8.5? Yeah. So for this, I've generally enjoyed this conversation. I think there's some real good nuggets here for everybody. So if people want to learn more about you and find out about what you do and maybe get from A to B in record time, where are people finding you?
Where are people finding me? On Instagram, mostly. My Instagram handle is @BM Online Training, all just one word. If you want to message me, ask me a question, whatever, I'm in the DMs. I'm not scary, as you could probably make out through this recording. Even if you just got a general question, don't worry, I'm not going to be that guy who's going to hard sell you and be like, sign up for my coaching now. Just ask me a question. And if you do want to coach me, then we can do that as well. So that's the main platform. I've got a website as well. If you want to check out the services, it's www.bmonline.training, and you can find me there as well.
Awesome, mate. Been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you too, Simon.
Thank you for listening to the Self-Made Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. Before you go, I've got a little favor to ask you. In order for us to grow the show, get bigger guests, get higher production value, and to get more clips of the show out to you guys, we need your support. So if you could give us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. If you prefer to watch your podcast and maybe haven't realized that's an option, head to YouTube and search Simon Kingsley Dutton to subscribe to us there. Also, if you have any further questions about training, nutrition, or just want to chat shop, head to @Kingsley Dutton on Instagram. I'm very active there and happy to answer any and all questions. So until next time, I'll speak to you soon.